All right, we're live here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Phil and Kevin, you guys don't know this, but my Monday morning show that I host with Corey Connors and Avelio Matos called Packaging Today, we have an intro song. And whenever we go live on YouTube, it gets banned in Belarus because because apparently it's the song is like copyrighted. It's called Daddy Fingers. So we are actually there's no Daddy Finger song being played. I believe that we are
Dang
also
it.
we could be live in Belarus uh, at this very moment. So this is a kind of an impromptu LinkedIn live, YouTube live here because as we were talking about just recording the podcast, I heard that today was a big day in the industry. Oddly enough, I just posted about why you shouldn't talk about politics on LinkedIn, kind of tongue in cheek, and why it actually matters. And then we go to start recording, and I'll introduce Phil and Kevin here in a second. But Phil was like, "Today is a big day because of this policy decision." I was like, "Well, I guess we're just gonna have to go live here on Friday the 13th." So I am joined by Kevin Weiss. Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah.
Just like Brett Weiss. Phil Clark, who
I know him.
I went to high school with. Kevin Weiss has his PhD from the Rice University, and we're going to be discussing his work and why it matters for packaging and why it's so groundbreaking and cool. And we'll also discuss why I'm joined by my tallest friend that I know, Phil Clark. Phil is a hydrogen safety guru. He has a master's degree. Phil has a math formula named after him, and is just he's. I think we've been friends since kindergarten or preschool.
5 years old.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We were co-founders of the Joe Wolf fan club circa 1997, 1998, and Phil has just been looking for a reason to come on the podcast.
It's true. It's true, and I found it.
I have found it. I have discovered the reason why I can finally come on the podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Adam, and I am officially the dumbest person on this call. So I'm excited to get undummified, and we're going to talk about policy. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about turbostatic graphene. Did I say that right, Kevin?
Yeah, turbostatic. Yep.
Turbostratic. I already messed it up.
Nope.
Turbostratic graphene and hydrogen and oxygen and plastic. And I think I titled this like when all of these things have a baby, this is the baby. And so
it's a cool baby. It's a really cool baby.
We've made a baby. Well, first of all, I would love for you both to introduce yourselves. So why don't we start with Phil Clark, since you're up here at the top of the screen.
Fantastic. Adam, can't tell you how excited I am to be on this. And Kevin, I can't tell you how excited I am to be riding your coattails to get onto this podcast. So, name is Phil Clark. I have a company called Omits, and we help people navigate codes and standards using artificial intelligence and neural network stuff. And I have a background for the last decade working in hydrogen safety. And the world of hydrogen has been emerging like crazy in the last few years, and just today they released the candidates, or not the candidates, the selection for the hydrogen hubs. And this is a $7 billion investment into the US infrastructure for deploying hydrogen technologies at 7 different locations across the United States. And it's a big effort, and it's been in the works for last year and a half, and part of the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed. So that's the bit of policy that, you know, we can talk about. Don't want to dive deep into it, but the cool thing is hydrogen is being adopted by private industry, and today is a cool day for that.
And wasn't there was another announcement, Phil, about this initiative? Tell us.
Well, it's not about this initiative, but I got I formed a partnership with the Center for Hydrogen Safety as their lead trainer for NFPA 2 Hydrogen Technologies Code. So it's pretty.
Yeah,
we'll give you exciting. And
congrats, Phil.
But you were telling me, and I was like, "You're the what with the that sounds." Sounds like you're so excited about it, and I'm so excited that you're excited about it.
It's, you know, there's so many cool things happening. Personally, like, incredibly blessed. I have an awesome partnership with an engineering firm on the West Coast, Tate and Associates, to help do business development for hydrogen. And a lot of things are cool and moving in a really fun direction for me personally, which is really cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And Kevin, I would love for you to, if you have breaking news about, I don't even know what
career. No.
Graphene?
Yeah.
Prepare.
So I just finished my PhD at Rice University in chemistry. I did it a lot on nanomaterials, which we'll talk about, and then also I really am passionate about clean energy and sustainability, and how we can, deal with some of these problems like plastic waste that we have. We've known for decades how to recycle plastic waste, but it's still an issue. So it's not necessarily the science that's the problem, but the translation and the value standpoint and things like that. So can we, upcycle waste instead of recycling it to make it more economically viable and things like that. And then also kind of how that interfaces with clean energy is something that I'm really passionate about. So thanks for having me on, Adam.
Awesome. This is going to be great. And if you're listening to this live, please jump in with some comments. If you are, I didn't plan this to go live, so I didn't invite people to an event. So if no one comments, that's fine. If you're listening to this on recording, then where were you at 10:30 on October 13th when we recorded this? You really missed out on some pretty cool stuff. Well, Kevin, so the reason why we got connected and the reason that Phil connected with us is not only because he wanted to be on the world's okayest packaging podcast on the planet, but also because this does impact my world of packaging, and I'm always fascinated by meeting people who are smarter than me, who are solving some of the biggest problems in the world. And so I would love for you to just kind of explain it to me like I'm a third grader, because I probably am when it comes to what it is that you have studied. If you want to talk about Denver Nuggets history, I probably have my
PhD level. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's your guy.
But that is way less important in the world than what it is that you're working on. So maybe explain how it is that you came up with this, and then what is it you'd say you do here?
Yeah, I always like to start talking about the why first. So I kind of already gave the main part away. Plastic waste is a problem that we know how to solve but haven't, because the money doesn't make sense or logistics don't make sense. Another thing is hydrogen. So hydrogen is this really clean burning fuel, doesn't produce any CO2, ideally, but when we produce it, it's either really expensive to produce what's called clean hydrogen, and this is hydrogen that isn't produced with CO2, or it's really cheap to produce hydrogen and a lot of CO2. So which one do you think industry uses right now? The cheap method that produces a lot of CO2. So if hydrogen, even though it's this clean burning fuel, if we're producing all this CO2 when we're making the hydrogen, is it really a clean fuel source? So that's another problem, that the economics just aren't making sense, just like plastic recycling. And so a few years ago, just at the start of my PhD here, working with Dr. Jim Torr at Rice, we came up with this technique that was able to upcycle or convert really low value waste materials like waste plastics, waste paper, waste food into really high value nanomaterials. So nanomaterials is another really buzzy word. Most people are kind of familiar with carbon nanotubes, maybe from maybe 15, 20 years ago. But I like to go to carbon fiber. So you've probably heard of carbon fiber. Very expensive, very high value product because it has great properties, right? It's used in race cars because it's so strong, so light, but it's really expensive still. And so the carbon nanomaterial called graphene is kind of similar in that it's very light, very strong, very conductive, and very hard to make. But this process we figured out in our lab at Rice is able to convert waste materials into this super material, graphene. And so this super material has been being used by Ford Motor Company actually for about the past 3 years. They started putting it in their cars, in the polymers in their cars, to lighten them, strengthen them, increase their durability, things like that. So even just adding, 1 gram per kilogram or 0.1% by weight can increase the strength of cement and concrete by 35%. So it's a really great material. You just add kind of a sprinkle of this fairy dust to whatever your polymer or concrete
now
is.
we're talking. Now we're talking my language.
There you go.
But it's really expensive to make. So it's very valuable because it has all these great applications. And so once we said, hey, what if we could make graphene from trash? And so the process revolves around ultra fast heating. So basically what happens is we take our waste feedstock, whether it's plastics, we'll talk about like packaging, some packaging plastics. We don't have to separate it. We don't have to wash it. We can take mixed plastic feedstocks. We grind it into, centimeter sized pieces. And then what we can do is this ultra fast heating process. So we basically pass electricity through our plastics. We mix in maybe a little bit of coal so that the electricity can get through. And just like our heating coils in our toaster oven, for example, we pass electric current through our toaster. They get red hot within seconds, usually. And so instead of like a normal oven where we wait for the heat to transfer from the heating coil to our slice of bread, what if we plug the bread directly into the outlet? That's basically what we can liken our process to. We're getting the heat generated right where it needs to be, right on that slice of bread. But instead of toasting it, we, by passing a few amps worth of current from an outlet through it, what we do is we discharge a lot more current, a couple hundred amps through it. And so we get a lot of heat, about 3000 Kelvin. And so what happens then inside our plastics that we are reacting is all our bonds break. And so they're going to reorganize in the most favorable way. We can think of it that way. And that favorable way just happens to be making that super material graphene. Cool. So within a second or less, we can convert our plastic into this high value super material graphene. And so we knew that in about 2020, and that paper was published in Nature, which is a pretty good journal.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the
went out and so the forest, and you were like, we're published.
So we carved it into a tree there. Yeah. No, so that work had been known for a while, but we realized, and kind of where I came in was whenever we reacted plastics in this manner, we got a lot of vapor coming up. We're like, what's the vapor? I don't know. It goes out through the fume hood. So who cares? And so then I realized, well, what if it's, thinking if our plastic, for example, polyethylene is carbon and hydrogen, and what we get is graphene, which is all carbon. So where does all this hydrogen go? And so, talking with my boss, we said, let's try and figure this out. So we started trapping the volatiles. We had to buy and kind of design a whole new system to be able to capture, measure, figure out what these gases are. And pretty soon we were like, oh, wow, this is hydrogen in pretty high purity. So we get, similar purity to the current ways that we produce hydrogen. And then also we're not producing any CO2 like most industrial hydrogen production methods today. So not only are we converting this trash into a high value graphene super material, we're also getting this clean fuel hydrogen out. And because the graphene is so valuable, about, we can say $100,000 per ton. So it's a very valuable material. If we sell that graphene, even at 5% of its current market value, assuming that, we disrupt the market and costs go down or whatever. Even if we sell our graphene on a 95% off sale, we're still making our hydrogen for free. So we're making this clean fuel from waste plastic for free just by selling our graphene. So it's a really nice process because unlike a lot of recycling methods, the economics make sense. And we're able to convert. We don't have to, like I said, we don't have to separate it, which is a lot of the money and manpower in current recycling methods. We don't have to wash it. We just mix it with a little bit of coal, do this ultra fast heating process, and we get valuable hydrogen as a clean fuel source, and we get our valuable graphene super material. So it's a pretty neat process.
2 questions, and I want to get to Phil here in a second. First question, what does your dog think about this? Your dog seems very intent on jumping into the interview.
Yeah.
I am like, you know what, it's just humans only, but it's a really cute puppy.
My wife and I, we just adopted her actually about a week ago. So that's why she's in my lap instead of fighting with the other dog during our super important podcast. Yeah. But her name is Churro. So
what's up, Churro?
Nice.
So going back here to what you're saying, so if I'm kind of following down, I talk actually quite a bit about the problems with recycling is value.
Yes.
That there's a distinct value problem when it comes to, like for example, like post-consumer polypropylene, right? So
Yep.
there's a need for it. It just the process at which it takes for us now to get there doesn't match with the value relative to, just the creation of polypropylene is pretty cheap and easy. So
Yep.
there's a value there. It's not a matter of chemistry, it's just a matter of economics. So in this case, if you have a plastics recovery facility and they go, great, Kevin, so we don't have to actually spend the time. So our throughput is faster and we can and you value this at a higher rate. So maybe there's now an in market where they can sell these bales of plastic, mixed plastic to, assuming that there is a scalable, model here to produce this, they can sell that for, I don't know, 5x what they could have gotten had they spent 5 times more time trying to process this out and to make sure everything was clean and perfect. They can just bundle it, sell it to you,
Mhm.
and you know that you now have an in market of hydrogen, which we're going to talk to here with Phil, and also graphene. Is that kind of the bluey cartoon version of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with a lot of waste streams and trying to go to more of a circular economy, both in plastics and electronics and things like that, I don't think the answer is going to lie in recycling. I think it's going to land in more upcycling, is kind of a newer term where we take our waste material and we upcycle it into something that's useful and higher value. So then we're able to kind of incentivize economically recycling and responsible waste disposal and things like that. So you're totally right that by making a more valuable product, we're able to incentivize and tell a really cool story about how to manage plastic waste.
And Adam, when I saw this article that he had published or that was published about his work, the first thing that went through my mind is this gappy tooth prospector looking at like all the plastic in the ocean and just being like, if we can get that, we can make money through graphene and hydrogen. And it's just super exciting to be able to think about like it's a really different way of looking at, dealing with the trash situation, dealing with energy situation, and dealing with material science all in the same product and process. It's incredibly cool.
That's awesome. I guess the skeptic in me would say, like a friend of mine has a shirt and it says part of the shirt he made says, on a long enough timeline it ends up in the landfill. Like you just, so if you have like, let's take this graphene and it reaches the end of its life, whatever that might be. So if it's concrete, if it's carbon fiber, if it's in a car or whatever it is, is it like normal, steels and metals where it just it can stay graphene as long as it wants to stay graphene? Because I know metal recycling has a tremendous amount of value, right? Is it the same with graphene, or is that like a really hard material to repurpose once it's done?
So it would be pretty hard to like take the graphene back out of cement and reuse it. Same thing with polymers. But one thing, so I also had a collaboration when I was in grad school with Ford Motor Company. Once they heard about our process to make graphene from trash, they sent us a bunch of plastic from Ford F-150s, and they said, "Can you convert this into graphene?" And we did, and we sent it to them. And our graphene that we made from their trash car was actually converted into, it performed better than the graphene they were buying on open market. And so then they tested it in the polymers. It outperformed their current stuff. And then they said, what if we send you this test sample back? Can you recycle it again? And I said, yeah, why not? And so then we took that graphene enhanced plastic, processed it the exact same way, and we got out more graphene and ostensibly more hydrogen. So we can kind of do it that way, but trying to get the graphene back out of the composite, whether that's a plastic or a cement, would be pretty hard, but you have to use so little of it. Like you'd probably use 1 kilogram per ton of cement. So
yeah.
So it sounded though like what Adam was talking about was, what is the life cycle of graphene? Like if you end up being very successful with this and you're able to generate a lot of graphene, and graphene all of a sudden plummets in price, we have tons
Absolutely.
of it.
Yeah.
You'd
So
you'd equated it to like fly ash for coal to some degree of, if it becomes this valuable product that we have too much of, what happens to it? Like what can you do with
worst
it?
case scenario, we're taking the plastics, which can go into microplastics, or we're taking the food waste, which can be eaten by bacteria and turned into CO2, which is bad. And we're converting it to kind of what's called a terminal carbon source. And so graphene is pretty environmentally inert. If you think about graphene, it's very similar to graphite, which we mine to use in batteries. And so if graphite or graphene was able to break down, we wouldn't have batteries, right? So graphene, at least on like a few 100-year timescale, is probably pretty inert environmentally. So even if worst case scenario, we don't sell this graphene and we're just converting our waste plastic, which can make microplastics or whatever other bad CO2 or whatever, and we're converting it into hydrogen and this terminal carbon source, which again isn't going to be CO2. So even if that's buying us a few 100 years to figure out, the CO2 issue with global warming,
Yeah.
So it is kind of a environmentally inert terminal carbon source is what it's called. So
by the way, I guarantee you there's somebody who listens to this who's like a Chevy person. They're like, well, I think every Ford F-150 is a trash car. That's what I was They're making that comment already. So
yeah. I'll look for that one later.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so we get this cool super material called graphene, and then you mentioned, okay, you discover hydrogen, which is how Phil got interested in it. So Phil, maybe talk about as a hydrogen safety guru. Talk about like why this is exciting in conjunction with what was announced today, that they're able to create this, and how can the packaging community participate in the radness?
Yeah, totally. So one of the first things that Kevin talked about was the current state of hydrogen. So right now, probably 95% of all hydrogen is generated through what's called steam methane reformation. And steam methane reformation is essentially super nerdy. We'll dumb it down to a third grade level. So it's essentially you take gas from the natural gas grid and you heat it up with steam and you get hydrogen out one side and you get carbon dioxide out the other. And it's a lot of carbon dioxide. And
are you like the Martin Luther of this reformation though? You're like coming in.
Yes. I'm trying to be. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And so you get the hydrogen out one side and it's neat. It's usable. It's very, there's a lot of products that you can make with it, anywhere from, a fuel for heating in furnaces. You can put it through, applications to generate electricity. You can put it back into chemical feedstock. A lot of cool applications on it. But current state, it's pretty nasty. It generates a lot more carbon dioxide than traditional fuels. But that's what they're trying to change with today's announcement of the hydrogen hubs, is how do we green this up? How do we make it more sustainable to actually generate hydrogen? And the biggest focus right now is what's called electrolysis. And so that's where they take water and electricity, and ideally from these variable sources of electricity like wind and solar, and split that water into hydrogen and oxygen. And you can do that on a pretty big scale. And there's a lot of companies that are really, really, really trying to make some big plays into this, of generating a lot of hydrogen using these electrolyzers. And it's neat. It's very fantastic, and there's a lot of money being thrown on it because it's a really complex problem to solve. And one of the key things in a sustainable future has been identified. Hydrogen has to be part of that portfolio of energy.
Yeah.
The cool thing about what Kevin does is it looks at a different way to generate hydrogen in a way that's not been considered. Right.
And it's still clean hydrogen, and that we're not producing very much CO2. We still get very high purities of hydrogen, but it's just much cheaper. So one of the issues with electrolysis is that it costs about, to get 1 kilogram of hydrogen from electrolysis, it's going to cost 3 or 4 times more than getting that same amount of hydrogen from the bad way of making hydrogen, the steam methane reforming, which makes a lot of CO2. So that's kind of the issue that also they're trying to fix with clean hydrogen or green hydrogen. Can we make it economically competitive to make hydrogen and not make CO2? So,
and that's actually DOE, the Department of Energy's goal is this concept called the hydrogen shot, where the goal is to get 1 kilogram of hydrogen for $1 within 1 decade. And that's a huge order. And that's really hard to achieve with current state electrolysis. And so like when I read the paper on like net negative cost at 5% of current market value of graphene, like what Kevin's not really talking about being a hydrogen generator necessarily. Like it's solely for the purpose of generating graphene. It's a hugely valuable, way more valuable than hydrogen. But the waste product is something that can be directly injected into a grid, like a pipeline of hydrogen, and make money that way too. And so how cool is this that you're solving a problem of taking waste,
packaging,
crunching it up? Packaging. You take packaging, you crunch it up, and you get this amazing product out that you're focusing on, the graphene. And on the back end, you're like, we're also making hydrogen. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Like it's really, really cool. And Kevin, the only carbon dioxide that really goes into this would be from the heating, and that depends on your energy source. So that could be
you're right. And then if we do try to break down polymers or things that contain that oxygen, then we do make some carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. But if we're thinking about polypropylene, polyethylene, polystyrene, molecules that don't have any oxygen in them, then we're not making any CO2. So
you mean, but polystyrene is a bad word, Kevin. You're not allowed to use it.
Oh, okay.
No,
All right.
no,
just joking. No, it's not.
Oh no.
I enjoy educating people when they're like, styrofoam is bad, and I'm like, but what are your thoughts on polystyrene? And they're like, like the Starbucks lids. They're like, yeah, those are pretty nice. I'm like, that's also styrofoam.
That's the same thing. Whoa.
They're like, yeah.
Great.
So jinx. Okay. This is super fascinating, and I knew that we would have a very robust and long conversation here. But I guess so we've got these two things. So we take the crap that we make in our industry, and then we give it to Kevin, and Kevin turns it into rad graphene and also clean hydrogen.
Yep.
And then I understand what happens with the graphene. Phil, what is stopping, or what would be needed to create maybe some circularity? Is there a way that the hydrogen comes back to our crap and we can use it to make more feedstock that creates that kind of closed loop?
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues with the hydrogen hubs as it is right now is they're really focused on generating a lot of clean hydrogen, which is fantastic. But who's going to take it? Who's gonna take it, and what are they gonna do with it? And so the conversation now that everybody's really focusing on is how do we get demand for hydrogen? There's ways where you can make electricity. There's ways where you can create heating through furnaces and things like that. But what else can we do with it? One of the big obvious ones is you make ammonia, and ammonia is necessary for fertilizer and a lot of cool existing applications. And that's pretty dang easy. You have a process that's pretty easy to take nitrogen from the air and hydrogen and convert, ammonia.
And that's one of the major users of hydrogen gas right now. Is
totally
making ammonia. Yeah, before we even have hydrogen powered cars or things like that. Yeah.
And so the thing that has really pivoted in the last 5 years in the hydrogen world is, it's a multitasker. And so you can do a lot with it, including it's a base feedstock for chemicals in the refining industry. And so you can take hydrogen, you can make ammonia, you can make methanol, you can do a lot of things. And this is where I start to get stupid I start to hand it off to Kevin, you're down there for me. I hand this off to you and say, all right, if I can make hydrogen and we can make a couple of these really simple molecules and hand them back off to industry. And it's great that we have you here as a representative of, an oil and gas company. Like, what can you do with that as far as making packaging materials that Adam can take and sell? And then we do this all over again and
Yeah,
close the loop.
I love that. By the way, we did get one person commented here. We got Len, says, "Good morning, gentlemen."
Good morning,
metaltalent.com. Thanks, Len, for chiming in. I want to give you a lovely shout out. I
feel famous now that somebody is actually watching this.
It's a really big deal. It
really is the most okayest packaging podcast I've ever been on.
I know. It's great. Well, that makes a ton of sense, and I'm sure that there's so much more. I think about, like, I was mentioning before we got on the call, my friend Michael Ferrari and what they're doing at the Consortium for Waste Circularity.
Yeah.
There's I actually got to do, if I can talk about my own MBA, where we looked at how can we create cellulose, pure grade cellulose from CO2.
Very cool.
And so that was a fun. We were creating the business use case for it, not the material. I didn't understand the science behind it, but it was like, yes, if we can stop beating trees literally into a pulp, and we can use CO2, that would be pretty awesome. So it's really neat to see people looking at this, bringing together industry, bringing together academia, bringing together government, and saying, okay, how does this work for everybody? Because if it's just government and academia, but there's no industry involvement, then there's no scalability. I hate to say it, but if nobody can make money, if there's no economics behind it, it doesn't matter, because altruism is not going to win. That's why we're not just pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere, which we can do, and dumping it all the way down into the core of the earth.
Right.
Sure, we can do that, but it costs, billions of dollars, and nobody makes money doing that. So we got to figure out these things.
Yeah. And that's why I think upcycling is the answer when it comes to a lot of recycling or waste use. But going back to, there's so many cool green or sustainable technologies out there, especially at the academic level, that don't make the jump to industry. And one of the reasons for that is scalability, issues with scaling. And then also people aren't sure green or sustainability can be a buzzword, especially when we're thinking in academia. If I'm trying to get my paper published in a journal and I can say, oh, it's a green process or it's a sustainable process, then those buzzwords might help me, get a better journal or something like that. And so there's some cynical people in industry that are like, is it actually green? Is it actually scalable? And so one thing that I just really am proud of is that we were able to do what's called a life cycle assessment on our new process. And so life cycle assessment, we're familiar. Yay. Right. I know Phil is working at NREL. Yeah, NREL has done a lot of really, really good work, and Argonne National Lab also.
By the way, can I give a quick shout out here? So because I want you to jump into this, but there's a cool tool called SpecWrite for packaging data, and they have a tie into this LCA tool called Compass by Triac, where you can comparative, like, okay, if I lightweight my PET by 10%, what's a quick LCA instead of having so you can just pull in your data and then get the LCA within 30 seconds. It's really pretty awesome.
That's powerful. That's really cool. So assuming we're all familiar here with life cycle assessment, where we can look at the inputs and outputs of a process, whether it's making 1 kilogram of hydrogen or 1 kilogram of graphene or one piece of packaging, we can say, oh, we need this much energy, this much CO2, this much water, this much raw materials, and to make 1 kilogram or whatever our unit is. And so I was able to do the life cycle assessment for both the graphene we make by our process and the hydrogen we make by our process. So we can quantify or give numbers to how green is our process, how sustainable is our process. So that's kind of, I'm hoping we're really demonstrating we can, we're 80 or 90% more sustainable using less energy, less CO2 compared to current ways of making graphene, where we use less energy than electrolysis and we produce a whole heck of a lot less CO2 than steam methane reforming. And so that's kind of I wanted to be able to quantify that. So when people say, is it really sustainable, or are you just saying that as a buzzword? We can say, no, here are the numbers.
Exactly.
And then also for the scalability aspect, a startup that's been around for a couple of years called Universal Matter is running with the waste to graphene step. So I'm really hopeful that they'll pick up the hydrogen part as well. But they're already almost to ton per day levels of converting coal into that high value graphene. And so they're doing really great work scaling this process up. And this is the same process, except we're using plastics and getting out hydrogen as well. So that's kind of, when you're studying at a university and, doing your research, is this going to matter? You want to make sure it's scalable. You want to make sure it's actually sustainable by doing LCA or economics assessment, as well as having, a really great startup company doing a similar process. So
you know what, I
give
just
them a shout out as well.
Can we give a shout out here to our guy Robert Mortensen? Science is fun, business is fun.
It is.
Science plus business is double the fun. Go
You
ahead.
know, I don't think it's linear like that. I think it's actually like 4 times the fun.
Yeah, like exponential maybe.
It's
Yeah.
this exponential like growth.
Curve goes like this.
Think about that, Robert. Think about that.
Yeah.
It is way more fun than just double fun.
By the way, you guys do need to go also on this podcast that Taylor Sparks does. It's called Materialism, the Material Science Podcast. I'll make sure to connect you up with my friend Taylor over there. We were part of the TEDx Salt Lake City community.
That's awesome.
I would love to.
You guys have a way more nerdery thing. Phil, why don't you jump in and say what you're talking about, then we'll get this thing wrapped up.
Yeah. So the last thing I was going to say about Kevin's stuff is, he can, when that company that he's has adopted his technology can use it, they can actually take the hydrogen and put it through a fuel cell and generate their own electricity to power that thing. And then that brings it to like a self-licking ice cream cone. Like this thing is just like amazing, where you don't even need to power the unit. You just siphon and
take
just
the hydrogen and
itself.
put it through.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really cool. Well, guys, how do people, if they have follow-up questions, how do they get in touch with you? Can I tag you guys? Are you active on LinkedIn at all? I know Phil, you've been active, but Kevin, you are too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely love it.
Well, I love when people when Phil reached out to me about my research, I felt so special. So
you are special, Kevin.
So the more people that see my research or want to talk and things like that. And actually someone from NREL talked about the life cycle assessment as well. I don't remember her name, but she gave some great feedback as well. So
was it Phil and Relissa?
No.
Okay.
But so one of the biggest things that I want to challenge your I don't know,
audience,
your audience, your crew, your loyal followers. You are an influencer, like
your serfs.
20,000 people following packaging. Like, I feel special, very special. But the thing that I want to challenge your audience with is, how can you use hydrogen, and not just like hydrogen, but like any of the derivatives of the molecules I take. So like methanol and ammonia and some of those base chemistries, and Kevin, start rattling off other stuff that it can generate for the plastics, like maybe
like enriching base oils to give them more heating value, things like that. And there's a lot of really cool catalysis, like Adam was talking about, where we can take CO2, and if we link it up with hydrogen, maybe we can convert CO2 into methane, a really useful fuel source, and other chemistries like that all use hydrogen to kind of get from something that doesn't have a lot of value like CO2 into something that might. So hydrogen has a lot of value beyond just making ammonia or maybe one day powering cars. It has a really, the global demand for hydrogen right now is almost 100 million metric tons, and that's without a lot of hydrogen cars. So there's a lot of hydrogen being used all over. So
got it.
Yeah,
that's cool. Well, hopefully people will start, kind of thinking and dreaming and contacting you, and I'm really fascinated just to hear how the journey keeps going, because it's just one like step in the journey, right? But I envision there'll be a day where I'm like, I had both those people on my podcast. I knew Kevin when he was just he had just adopted this puppy, and
Yeah, yeah,
it was fantastic. And now look at him. He's
yeah.
Look at him.
Little window into the world. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. Well, gentlemen, thanks so much. When we end the stream, but just stay on because it's gonna upload your audio so that the podcast can sound quite lovely. But appreciate you, Phil and Kevin, for coming on and making me smarter. And it's a hard task, but someone had to do it, so I appreciate it. To Len and Robert and everyone else who listened to this live, thanks for tuning in. And if you catch this on record or on replay on LinkedIn, or if you listen to the podcast, please reach out. I'll have all the show notes down there where you can connect up. And thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us,
Appreciate
Adam.
the opportunity.
Yep.